All right, it is July 14th, 2016, and we are just starting to harvest tomatoes, tomatillas, peppers, and cucumbers from the garden. So it's late. We've had stuff out for a long time, but it's just now ripening. So I'm going to take you on a tour of the gardens. We're going to start in the front yard, and in the front bed where there used to be bushes, there are now peppers. That's a Carolina Reaper and an Ecuadorian red, or capsicum pubescens from Ecuador. And then this used to be bushes, and it is now almost entirely hot peppers. And it's shaded, so they don't do fantastic, but they put on lots of foliage, just not many peppers. And then we even have a few over here by the house. So this is our brand new garden bed. This also used to be bushes and lawn, and it is now dug out and mulched and ready for a new set of front yard crops. So far we have, these are a couple Scotch bonnets, hot peppers, and this is a jalapeno. They're caged for the deer. It's our rain barrel, which feeds a garden that I'll show you in a minute. These are amaranth going around the rain barrel, and that's a crepe myrtle. It's a decorative bush that'll get fairly big but should attract pollinators and birds. And then this is a rhododendron, so that'll get fairly bushy. We'll keep it fairly small to kind of shade other things in the garden, because in Missouri the sun can just be overwhelming and too brutal. This is our frontmost bed, and it contains mostly hot peppers that we overwintered. So these are peppers that spent the winter in my office at school and then came home and went in the ground in this bed. They're mostly doing okay. They don't put on a ton of fruit, and I think it's just because this garden gets too much sun. They just get pelted by the sun. We have flowers growing in it, because technically you're not allowed to have a vegetable garden in your front yard in Baldwin, so this is not a vegetable garden, this is a flower garden. And we have these cages around them with chicken wire on top to keep the deer from browsing, and those work exceptionally well. The deer will come and they'll eat these hostas, but they won't eat, not hostas, whatever these flowers are. They'll eat them, but they won't eat the peppers. So here we have a garden where we're trying to get permanence established. So you can see along the front, I've got some asparagus coming in. It's the first year for the asparagus, so we'll be able to harvest next year. And then down here I've got some rhubarb coming in, some rhubarb over here. It's also the first year for the rhubarb, so we'll harvest next year. And this big guy is horseradish, so this is not going to be his permanent home. We'll dig him up and plant him in the backyard. And then I've just put salvaged corn in, more just to kind of shade the garden, because I tried to grow some cabbage and kale in here, but it just got pummeled by the sun, so I hope the corn would shade it a little bit, but still most of the cabbage and kale didn't make it. So this is the biggest and best corn bed. The corn already has ears on it, and the ears are starting to get fairly big. Some of them look like they're almost ready to pick. That guy's tassels or silks are dying back, so he's almost ready to pick. And this is a mix of heirloom sweet corn. So most of it is, or it's all open pollinated, and some of it will be dark. Some will be purple kernels, some will be white kernels, and some will be a mix. So now we're in the backyard, and this is the first of our several composters. It's a pyramid composter. It works fairly well. It has these open slots on the top, so it can take coffee grounds, vegetables, and it goes in the top, and then over time it compacts down to the bottom. It works very efficiently, very quickly. So along the fence with our neighbor, we have some decorative bushes, but we also have our raspberries and blackberries. So this is the third year for this blackberry plant, and it's probably produced maybe 50 or so berries, and they're just coming in, so we've been eating them for the last few days. Fence row to our oldest composter. So this is an older pyramid style composter. It's just a big box essentially. So compost goes into the top, and then once it's matured I can pull it from the bottom, and usually it's pretty crude, so I put it into another composter for finishing. And this is probably our most efficient composter. It's a roto barrel, so crude compost from the other two composters goes in here. I add water and rotate it every couple days, and then it ends up ready for the garden. This is our keyhole garden. This is what I got for Father's Day this year. It's basically a layer. It's a lasagna garden around the outside, so it's layered newspaper, cardboard, leaves, grass, dirt, and it was, when I made it, it was filled to the top. So you can see 3 exposed bars. Those were completely at the top when I made the keyhole garden, and they have basically compressed as the paper and the cardboard have compressed. But the idea is that you've got a lasagna garden around the perimeter, and then in the center you've got a compost bin. So as you put compost into the center, it breaks down and then provides nutrients to the soil around it. So we've got these marigolds that are just loving it, and they're going crazy. And we have some cherry tomatoes that are doing fine, some hot peppers, some kale, some cabbage, and a volunteer sunflower. So this is the back berm. This is where I store the dirt, the sod basically that I remove anytime I make a new garden bed. I put it back here and I cover it with leaves and debris, and it'll break down eventually, and then I can use it again in future gardens. So you can see, like, that's what the berm, that's the level that the berm is at, and then I've started at this end, I started to remove some of this dirt to reuse it. Growing all along the berm, we have squash, mostly volunteer squash. So I clear the area back behind those trees so that the squash can just go crazy. So we have lots and lots of volunteer squash. The more the squash grows into the yard, the less grass I cut. But we have some sweet corn that I saved that needed to be pulled from another garden. We have some tomatoes, not yet bearing fruit. We have squash, and most of the squash you can see is this variety here. It's just a small bulb with a curved handle. So I'm not sure what the kind of squash that is, but it seems to be pretty true breeding. Regardless of what kind of seeds we throw back here, that's usually what we end up getting. So we also have some ground cherries. They're doing just fine. When I bought them, they were tiny seedlings, so they've grown quite a bit.